Hello and a very warm welcome to Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a university professor, a best-selling author and a keen controversialist. For some, he is a man who dares to speak the truth. For others, a troublemaker and a know-it-all. Here he is, in person, Walter Krmer. I hope you're okay with the introduction. So far, so good, yeah? Now, besides being a full-time professor for business and social statistics, Walter Krmer has also published over 30 books and counting. They lambast popular ignorance, they warn against the misuse of statistics, they highlight the angst of the Germans, they excoriate what he sees as the malpractices of the press, and they defend the German language against abuse. It's quite an agenda, isn't it?
Perfect.
Perfect, yeah, I got it all right. How many books have you written?
Well, so far it's about 40, yes.
40? Oh, yeah, OK, so I'm a little bit behind with my count of 30. You're a person with incredible energy. You've written all these books. You're a professor. You've been involved in lots and lots of public debates here in Germany in recent years. And in those debates, we're going to talk about the German language quite a lot today. So I'm going to use a German word now. In those debates, you're often described as kämpferisch, yeah, which in English is sort of feisty, yeah. What makes you so feisty? What makes you a sort of an angry man?
I think that's not one of my best Eigenschaften.
Characteristics.
I should be much more calm in discussions, so I tend to, go too fast, to be impolite. Impolite. That is not one thing one should do. So and that's how those characterizations in the media came about.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were a youngster, yeah, a wee little boy, yeah, were you a troublemaker back then?
No, because we were living in a little village and there was not that much chance of making trouble with 20 kids in the whole village. So we were all just playing games, what kids do at that age. Okie dokie.
One of your most popular books, full stop, is a book called The Dictionary of Popular Misunderstandings. And it's interesting because I read that when you were a small kid, yeah, and you didn't have too many other kids to sort of get on your nerves, you collected mistakes.
That's right.
That people made, yeah?
Not exactly what people... In the media, and most of them...
Oh, come on, you weren't collecting mistakes being made by the media as a 7-year-old boy.
I could read. We had a paper, we didn't subscribe to one because we were quite poor then, but there was one in the village, so I could have my clippings.
Yeah.
So, and when I went to high school, I made it a hobby. Just to collect curiosities of all types.
That's interesting, yeah.
Things which later turned out to have been wrong, which interested me, and I started collecting them, and once they...
How old were you when you started collecting them? This is a fascinating business.
I think when I could start reading, so 7
years old, 8 years old, and you had the newspaper spread out and you were cutting out clippings.
Things appear to me as curious. That cannot be true. Or how come that this is so?
Yeah.
And then I started asking my parents, which usually didn't know either, asked my teacher, and he told me that how things came about, and I started a collection of curiosities.
OK, give me an example of one of the earliest curiosities that you collected.
I have still a folder back home in my office.
Really?
But I haven't looked at it for about 20 years. So,
you don't have an example, yeah?
Most of them were from sports and from... at that time, science fiction was very popular.
It was a big deal.
So I was collecting forecasts of things to come true, which then happened, not to turn out as they were forecasted.
OK, let's move forward to more recent times. This book, The Dictionary of Popular Misunderstandings, yeah? Give me an example there of the popular misunderstandings that trouble you and trouble Germany, perhaps.
It started with a debate in the German Bundestag to the fact that smokers should be made paying for their bad habits because they they cost the health system more than they pay in.
Absolutely right, says somebody like me.
It's completely wrong. Without smokers, the German healthcare system would be broke within a year. because smokers died that much earlier, the cost they avoid the system by doing so
says who?
Much outweigh.
Says who? Yeah, you're telling me that this is a fact, yeah, or you're telling me this as if it were a fact.
Colleagues of mine, not me, not
colleagues of yours,
of mine, have collected precise data for Switzerland, and you can view their report in any decent library, and they found out that Switzerland would have to pay more today for healthcare if there had been nobody smoking there for 100 years. So the healthcare system would be more expensive now than it really is if there hadn't been any smoker for 100 years.
Okay, so do I understand that you, having told me all this, all these hard facts from the Swiss researchers, that you are somebody who supports smokers, supports smoking, and would encourage smoking?
That's exactly. This is the first time that I have this debate with somebody else. So the inference then, the common inference is, Krämer is somebody who advocates people to die a socialist death, as it was called in the German Democratic Republic. People who died with 65, that was a socialist death. It was the noble way to say goodbye to this world. No, of course, everybody should become 100 years old, but we should not make the mistake of thinking that investing more money in avoiding diseases will make the healthcare system as such in general cheaper. It will make it even more expensive.
Okay. Point.
That was the first error.
Point taken. The first error. Yeah. Okay. From first errors to first impressions, you have had your first impressions from Walter Krmer. Here is more.
The campus of Dortmund's Technical University, home to the only statistics faculty in Germany. Graduates from here should have no worries finding a job. Walter Krmer has been professor for economic and social statistics at the university since 1988. His lectures are popular among students because he likes to present statistics as a practical discipline full of life. Everyday items and phenomena are recurring themes in his lectures, perfect for illustrating his insights. Think number crunching is boring? Think again. He also shows how figures and charts can be manipulated to distort what numbers tell us. He advises his students to pack a pocket calculator and a healthy degree of skepticism. Professor Krämer finds Germans predisposed to panicking. Almost every day he'll come across a scaremongering story in the media that he says has little substance. Professor Krämer has published over 40 books to date, most of them concerning popular science. He's had a number of bestsellers covering a range of topics, from popular misconceptions to his most recent tome about the national traits of Germans. After doing his military service as a young man, Walter Krmer studied mathematics and economics. He's married with 2 grown-up children and 1 grandson. Outside academia, he's the chairman of a German language preservation association and a critic of the Eurozone bailout policy. And he's very outspoken in the stands of his beloved Borussia Dortmund. Well, on match days at least. As well as attending their live matches, he also enjoys taking special stadium tours. The professor leaves the stats aside to enjoy this kind of hot seat, and he's our guest today on Talking Germany. Walter Krmer.
We'll be talking about Borussia Dortmund later. I'm very excited about that. First of all, here's a difficult question for you, and I imagine you're going to be able to give me the answer. What percentage of German men have mustaches?
Oh, well, since I have one, I tend to overestimate it, I assume. But I never thought about that, but my guess is about 10%.
About 10%, yeah? It's interesting. I have no idea. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It occurred to me spontaneously when I was looking at those pictures from your youth and looking at you now, obviously. 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 10. I don't know. It's interesting, though, that you
I would like to find out, yeah.
Yeah, well, you find out and we'll get in touch. Yeah. We could go on the internet now and get a figure, but that wouldn't be a very reliable figure necessarily, would it? Yeah.
Well, the best thing in that case, in fact, just take a sample. Walk around Kurfürstendamm and just check how many men who walk around there do have moustache.
Way to do things. It's interesting, though, that when I asked you, you said that your perspective would influence the figure that you would estimate because you yourself have a moustache. That tells us an awful lot about statistics, doesn't it?
That's right. That tells you that intuition, gut feeling, has a much greater impact on the outcome than people think. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. There's a very popular, a very famous indeed, English quotation, which is often attributed to Mark Twain. Yeah. Although I'm not sure that he actually coined it. I don't know if you know where I'm going yet. Yeah.
Three kinds of lies?
No. Well, yeah. There are lies. There are damned lies and there are statistics, yeah? This is your profession, you are a statistician.
Yes, that's right.
This quote, which is a wonderful quote from Mark Twain, it doesn't cast a very positive light on your profession, does it?
Well, statistics, numbers can be abused, like words, text also can be abused, so that's normal. In fact, in the Anglo-Saxon world, statistics are viewed in a much better, in a more favorable way. For instance, the famous quote attributed to Churchill, don't trust a statistic which you don't have manipulated yourself.
It's a good one, isn't it? Yeah.
It's never been said by Churchill. It has been attributed to him by Joseph Goebbels in World War II.
Oh, Lordy, I did not know that.
To put him in disrepute among the Germans at that time. So Churchill was a major admirer of statistics. Among his advisors, he always had statisticians. And the quote of his, which I like best, is, you have to look the facts in the eyes before the facts look at you.
That's good as well.
That's much better.
Yeah. Interesting. Why were you drawn to statistics in the first place? It's a very dry science.
It isn't. It's just the science of, well, making things apparent, looking behind the screens, looking at facts, not at what you think are facts. Maybe that has to do with my hobby of collecting mistakes.
We're going back to the youngster here, yeah? You were born in 1948.
That's right, yeah.
So it's just 3 years after the end of the Second World War. Yeah. Hard times here in Germany. You mentioned it, I think, in passing earlier.
That's right.
Hard times for your family?
Well, I grew up close to the Westwall, at the German-Belgian border, where there was the big Ardennen offensive at the end of the war.
The Ardennes offensive, yeah, exactly.
So I used to play in the Schützengraben, the trenches that were still left, and one of our favorite hobbies was to collect shells, or small shells which hadn't exploded, and throwing them in the fire and watch them explode. So
really?
But I did, since all of the kids in my neighborhood were as poor as we were, you don't feel that. So it was a happy childhood, in fact.
Okay. In 1969, I think it's fair to say, you went off to begin your studies. Right. This is the end of the 60s, 1968, student protests and all that. Were you ever a long-haired student protester?
For a while.
For a while?
Long hair lasted for longer.
What were you angry about back then?
I was angry because everybody else was angry, so I didn't think very hard about all this. That was just the feeling of the time. Yeah. All my colleagues, all my friends were angry, so I had to be angry as well, which lasted about 3 months. The long hair lasted longer, but...
And you've had a very successful career. You were a professor by the time, by 1988, so a pretty rapid rise,
well, that's 48, 88, that's not a fast-track career.
Yeah. But from the time you went actually off to university, anyway, you've written a lot of very successful books. You've had how grateful are you for the fact that the post-war Germany that you have grown up in, that you've lived your life in, has been so peaceful and so prosperous?
Well, when I was younger, I didn't think about that at all. Later on, I think it was luck. It was the Cold War, for instance, that made the Americans, the British, thinking differently about Germany. They needed it as a help against the Russians. If the Cold War hadn't happened, things would have come out quite differently.
Yeah. One reason why I'm asking, you might be wondering why I'm asking you about gratitude, because I think there's a huge sort of debate in Germany, and I think it's part of what your new book is about a little bit, about the Germans, about how the Germans see themselves. And at the core of that, very often when people are talking about the Germans, is the extent to which Germans are grateful for what they have, are comfortable with what they have, or the extent to which perhaps they moan too much. It is often said that people moan too much, and you are one of the people who tends to say that.
That's right. So there is a widespread attitude not to be happy with things as they are, to complain about the weather, complain about your workplace, complain about whatever, rather than taking things as they are and making the best out of it, which is more the Anglo-Saxon attitude towards events.
There's a new phrase in German which has been in the language for the last year or two now, called the Wutbürger. Again, I'm going to use one or two German terms today. Would you like to explain for our audience what a Wutbürger is?
Well, people who think they have the right to behave outrageously because they have detected some evil which they will now make disappear. I don't like those people at all.
Do you often wonder, do you not wonder yourself sometimes whether you aren't a little bit of a Wutbürger yourself, so an angry citizen? Because it sometimes seems to me that what you're doing is shaking your fist about the people who are shaking their fists.
Well, in writing. Indeed. So in my books I've many sorry stories about people who invented this dioxin panic in January 2010, which was the last public affair of that sort, which hit our country, which comes every 2 or 3 years. That we have one of such panics, public panics occurring. And then I really get angry about the people who fuel these things and without thinking twice and without thinking of the consequences.
OK, we'll talk about exactly that in just a second now. We're moving quickly now from panic to angst. One thing that people associate with Germany and Germans is angst, the German word for fear, that has, of course, also been adopted in the English language. Now, Walter Krmer has used his skill as a statistician to take a close look at just how much angst there really is in Germany and where it comes from. You have to tell me a little bit about your methodology there, Walter Krmer. It looks like you're cutting out little bits of newspaper cuttings once again.
No, that time, in fact, I did real research. I had the content of major newspapers scanned for 10 years, 2000 until the end of 2010, and checking how many articles are devoted to topics like dioxin or nuclear power accidents and panic themes of all sorts. And this was quite time-consuming, made a lot of, required a lot of effort. And so this was real hard work, not just paper clipping.
And you are telling me that the Germans have more angst than the Italians or the Brits or the Americans or...
That's right. So one of the results of that research was that leading German newspapers like Süddeutsche Zeitung or Frankfurter Rundschau publish about 4 times as much angst stories or panic articles than, let's say, Figaro or La Repubblica in Italy.
It's hard for me to believe that because I work in the media and because I know, you're mentioning newspapers, I know journalists who work there. And I, my English language speaking colleagues are always saying, oh, the Germans, they're so slow to get a headline. They're so slow to make a story. They stick to the facts. They're so boring. Yeah? And you're telling me that all they do is kick up sensations all the time.
Well, for instance, if there's an anniversary of some accident, like Fukushima, that happened about 3 years ago. So there's now every year a Fukushima memorial story in Süddeutsche Zeitung. There's none in the Times, there's none in La Repubblica, there's none in Le Figaro.
It's very ritualized, that kind of thing. I take your point. But, there's a bigger point here that, one or two of the things you're talking about, when you talk about BSE or something like that, the Germans are very concerned about nature, about health, about what they eat. And to be honest, that has to be a good thing.
Well, to be concerned about what you eat is, of course, good for your health.
Yeah.
But it starts to become a nuisance when you get worried by minimum amounts of pesticides in your food, which will never, ever endanger anybody, like during that famous dioxin panic in January 2010, where they discovered 3 billionth of a gram of dioxin in eggs. You would have had to eat about a ton per day until this had become a danger to your health. Yeah. And people nevertheless started panicking, and that's what makes me angry.
We've talked about the Germans in general, and you've written about the Germans in general. And when we talk about the Germans and angst, you know, what comes to mind for me most spontaneously, Germans have angst, are frightened of, or have fear of the war, for example. That has to be a good thing.
Well, that's one lesson they have learned, but I think this is even in much deeper. There's one theory by the famous Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, who has termed the what in German is called kollektives Unterbewusstsein, the
collective subconscious.
Subconsciousness. And according to Jung, this collective subconsciousness of people living what's now Germany is still formed by one of the worst experiences ever happening in any part of the world. It is the 30 Years' War, which the British, I think, don't know much about because it didn't.
It was a long time ago.
Time ago, and it didn't affect them. But for the people living here, about 1/3 of people living here died by force in a very short time. Yeah. So, according to Jung, this has shaped the collective subconscious.
There might be something in it. I mean, the English are always talking about how the country hasn't been invaded since 1066, and they act as though the collective memory goes right back to then. And who knows? Maybe it does. I'm not an expert on that. Let's talk about the present, though, a little bit. You are often acting as though the Germans are very angst-ridden, are very uptight, are very tense, but most of the foreign visitors, and a lot of people inside Germany, like you, say that, but a lot of the foreign visitors I meet who come to Germany tell me, what a revelation this is. All these Germans, they're so cool, they're so relaxed, they're so easygoing, to use a very English language phrase. And yeah, why won't you guys buy into that? I mean, since the 2006 World Cup, everybody's been coming to Germany and saying, whoa, what a country.
Well, I think that is not one of the major our bonus plus points, being easygoing, walking across Milan or Rome.
It's better than being tortured by angst, surely.
No, I mean, that's just not true. Just walk around Kurfürstendamm, watch the people, watch their faces.
I should explain, you've mentioned it now, the Kurfürstendamm is one of the most prestigious and best-known boulevards here in Berlin, yeah?
Well, if you walk down there, I think people are still looking at you in a more concerned way than they would look at you at the Via Veneto in Rome, for instance, or in Milan or in Paris. So they still have a worrisome attitude towards what is happening.
Here's a quote. You said, "Too many journalists see themselves as preachers and do-gooders who believe they can change the world for the better."
That's right. That's one of the second theory I have. How come that...
You're talking about me here, you know.
Yeah, that German angst has made it as one of the few words, German words in foreign languages. Next to Carl Gustav Jung and his theory of the collective subconsciousness, there is another theory by Johan Galtung, a very famous Norwegian scientist who has termed the phrase of the typical Anglo-Saxon, French and German intellectual style of thinking. Yeah. And according to Galtung, Anglo-Saxons tend to be problem solvers. They solve one problem and then go to the next, not worrying about whether the theory they use for the problem A is also good for problem B, whereas German thinkers like Hegel, Marx, Luther or Einstein want to build a world formula. They want to build one big pyramid, which they then defend with all their forces until the very end, because if this is attacked, their whole life will be ruined, and which makes them so stiff and so devoid of humor, German scientists. And journalists are also intellectuals. At least they like to see themselves as such. And if they have detected one big enemy, like nuclear power, they will fight it until the very end and won't stop until it has been destroyed.
OK, you've had your say. We're going to have to agree to differ. I, for one, am a journalist who is proud to be an intellectual. I don't think it means anything about me. I think it means that you're passionate about ideas. Yeah, maybe we can agree on that. He's nodding, yeah. It's all quite amusing, really, but there is a very serious side to this story, and I know that's the side that you see. You know, for me, the English language is a lovely language. Yeah, it's sort of being adopted in many ways in Germany. What's the problem?
Oh, first of all, it's in many senses an advantage that there is one language which you can use all across Europe. You can buy a cappuccino in Rome, which I probably couldn't do in Italian, and if the Italian waiter didn't speak English, I would have a problem. So that's no doubt that there are lots of advantages to it, but the disadvantages start to crop up when you stop using your own language, even when you could have used it. And that's what is happening in Germany on a big scale, and that really drives me crazy.
You set up in 1997 this society, what was it called? The Association for the Protection of the German Language. At that time. It's now called the German Language Association. Just explain to me a little bit more about how you protect a language. How can you actually do it? Because this is happening on a... language is spontaneous, it just happens.
So I think the German language will still be spoken in 100 years, but if we don't take care, it will be only spoken in the kindergarten, but not in universities, not in the offices of DAX firms and in business.
The blue-chip companies.
In blue-chip companies.
This is already happening. I was reading about the Alliance Insurance in Munich recently. They're going English.
Company language, that's right, which I think is a big mistake, because then your language becomes kind of a dialect. You cannot do science with that language anymore. And that's one thing which I think we should do something against that.
Yeah, and what exactly is the something, or could the something be?
For instance, we should continue teaching courses at the universities in German. Lots of my colleagues are proud that they can, in semi-proficient English, teach their courses to German students, which I think is ridiculous. Also, although many of my papers are published in English, I still do publish some in German, just to keep German as a language of the sciences alive. And there is a real danger that our language won't be a medium for communication in science, in business anymore within a couple of years if we don't do something.
Although it is very interesting what you're saying is, I mean, maybe it's true what you're saying, maybe your fears are well-founded, but certainly the Germany that I live in, that I move around in, I mean, I'm the kind of person who reads an awful lot. And I in recent years, I've been reading a lot of German language novels in German by German writers who are German-Turkish, German-Persian, German-Polish, German-Ukraine writers. It's a fantastic thing.
That's right.
And that's a kind of a vibrancy in the language. And also, at the same time, you know, when I'm sitting on the underground here in Berlin, I'm often sitting with people who, it's very, very clear they have two languages. And that's a great thing, because it doesn't mean that they're speaking the German less. It means that their understanding, their awareness of language is greater. Their passion for language is greater, and that's making German a more vibrant language.
Well, you have to make a difference. If you grow up speaking two languages, like my grandchild is doing at the moment, she's speaking German and Japanese, by the way.
German and Japanese, that's a good combination.
So that's wonderful. So if one parent speaking one language, the other parent another, that's optimal. The best thing that could happen to a child. But going to kindergarten and then being introduced to some sloppy English phrases by the kindergarten missus is what is happening in Germany at the moment on a big scale is a nuisance.
It's the sloppiness that makes you angry. It's the imprecision in the use of language.
No, these poor kids won't learn neither German nor English. So they will be handicapped all through their lives. Learning a language can, most of the cases, only be done either if your parents speak it or if you live there for a while in that country. You have been living here for a while, you speak perfect German. But learning German in England, I think, how many, a dozen people have managed that in a century? Not many more.
People used to do it in the olden days. That's how people used to learn languages, OK. We don't have to agree to differ here. We can just agree to see it sort of from slightly different angles.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I think we will agree about is for both of us, soccer is a great passion, both for Walter Krmer and for me. And we're going to have a look now at one of his favourite football clubs, not his favourite football club indeed, Borussia Dortmund. It is the best supported team in Europe, I have learnt. Let's have a look at this report and then we'll talk about the club and about his enthusiasm. BVB, Borussia Dortmund, yeah, of course. A wonderful Dortmund toaster there. I wouldn't mind one of those. Walter Krmer, you are a very dedicated Dortmund fan, yeah?
Also shareholder.
And a shareholder. First of all, as a fan, where did that come from? Where did that start?
Well, you have to be a fan of some club.
True.
So I grew up, in fact, in Mainz, so I'm still also a supporter of Mainz 05, because I studied there and lived there for 20 years. But already before I went to Dortmund, I followed them on TV. Yeah. And they were my favorite club for decades. I still remember when they won against Benfica Lisbon in 1963.
That's a long time ago, yeah.
Long time ago. I remember as it were yesterday.
Yeah. Were you there, or were you listening to this on the radio?
I watched it on TV.
It was on TV? Oh, yeah.
And when they won against, I think it was West Ham United in 1965, I think 2-0 by goals by Held and Emmerich, I think. Still remember that.
Some
so I've been following the club for decades, and I'm very happy that they are so good at the moment.
Okay, and you just mentioned the fact. I mean, you are a professor for business studies and economics, effectively, and you're a shareholder in the Dortmund club. They're the only stock market listed club in Germany. So does that mean they're fat cats? That they're sort of the capitalists of German soccer?
No, I think the idea was just to make every Dortmunder even more of a fan. So the shares initially cost 11 euros, now they are 3.60. At one time they were 80 cents. So if you then entered the market, you made a big revenue out of that.
You're talking about yourself here.
I started at all prices. I started when they were 11, 8, 6, 2, 1, 80 cents. Kept buying, kept buying. Yep. So it's now an even affair at the moment.
Tell me, everybody, or a lot of people, the vast majority of our viewers, I think, will know about the rivalry, the current rivalry between Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich. Yeah, and I just mentioned the word class. Is it a class war, a class difference between the two sides? What's going on there?
In a sense, of course, Dortmund is a Ruhr Valley football club.
So the industrial heartland of Germany.
Heartland, Bayern Munich always has been schickimicki, schickeria society, and Bayern Munich as a club is, of course...
Fancy pants club.
Fancy pants club. so in a sense, there is some kind of class war going on here.
OK. Do you know the Borussia Dortmund songs?
I know them,
when you go along to the matches?
I know them, but I think the Liverpool songs are better.
I love the Liverpool songs. Now, they are very great fans when they're singing. Last question, do you have a season ticket?
No, because I'm always watching midweek games, because my family lives elsewhere, so I'm not there on the weekend.
You're a commuter, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
How much does a season ticket cost? How much do the cheap season tickets cost?
I never even tried to buy one, but I think it was about 500 euro.
Yeah, which for people from abroad, it sounds like very, very little money indeed. People are always talking about how inexpensive the Bundesliga is, and for top quality football, that is really very good indeed. OK, Walter Krmer, we're going to move on to our quiz at the end of the show. Oh, we don't have time. When Dortmund play Bayern next time, is it going to be Angst or hope?
Well, I'm sure they will win.
Hope. That's your lot with the feisty Walter Krmer. There's more Talking Germany on our website. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, do come back next week. Bye-bye and tschüss.